En tiempos actuales, acompañamos a los distintos actores del mercado asegurador en la carrera por la transformación digital. Ser ágiles ya no es una opción. Mientras se enfoca solo en sus clientes, InBroker se encarga de todo lo demás. Es una plataforma diseñada para administrar todo tipo de riesgos dentro del mercado de seguros, desde líneas personales hasta negocios complejos. Permite a los bancos gestionar sus propios seguros. InBroker es un producto líder en la gestión de bancaseguros. Cuenta con la experiencia de más de 30 años siendo líderes en innovación tecnológica para grandes brokers, operando el 100% de su negocio. InBroker se integra fácilmente a su ecosistema de operaciones. Es el corazón de su negocio que late con una visión 360 grados, que impulsa su gestión de seguros hacia la innovación tecnológica.
La transformación digital nos inspiró a diseñar un portafolio con soluciones flexibles para nuestros clientes. Creamos un seguro de arrendamiento que se adapta a las facilidades del mundo digital. Diseñamos un seguro de auto que nuestros clientes pueden activar y desactivar cuando realmente lo necesitan. Los acompañamos en esos momentos inesperados por tan solo 123,000 pesos al año. Los protegemos ante posibles fraudes del mundo digital y cuidamos a cada miembro de la familia, incluyendo a los peluditos. Y lo mejor es que ahora nuestro portafolio podrá ser comercializado en Moon Digital, la plataforma que permitirá cotizar y vender todas nuestras soluciones. Somos tu compañía siempre, transformándonos en cada paso.
En Global Seguros tenemos soluciones para los que sueñan junto a su familia y saben que futuro es sinónimo de posibilidades. En Global Seguros encuentras la tranquilidad de proteger a los que más quieres. Nos comprometemos por ti, por tu familia, por el futuro. Empresa vigilada por la Superintendencia Financiera de Colombia.
En Experian creemos en el poder de la data para crear un mejor mañana. Capacitamos a los consumidores y a nuestros clientes para que administren sus datos con confianza. Ayudamos a las personas a tomar el control de su comportamiento financiero y a acceder a los servicios financieros. Ayudamos a identificar y transformar las oportunidades de nuestros clientes en negocios sostenibles. Potenciamos oportunidades y creamos juntos un mejor mañana.
Good morning, Mavir. And a very warm greetings to you and to everybody that is following us today through this important event that brings together so important expectations. One, for our country and with technologies and how it's affecting our industries. I also want to express our gratitude for providing this space to participate in your event. I want to thank Fasecolda for this. Now, the reflection from the Superintendent, which is my office, that I think can nourish the discussion and the understanding about how can we identify or recreate and understand what the future of the insurance sector will be like based on many of these elements and around technology that we've already seen. The perspective of the superintendent as authorities is also relevant in this understanding as well. And this is why we appreciate the opportunity of sharing our vision with you of how we understand and what's our take on what the insurance industry, in which direction should you head, trying to understand regulations, to consolidate some quick wins as soon as you can in a complex area with big tech participating now. So I think we have 3 or 4 main elements in our discussion from our side today. First of all, is the reality it's not longer futuristic to think and understand many implementations that have already taken place and that we can see and maybe in different segments, in different countries and industries. But for the insurance industry, it's now critical to understand that this is a present and ongoing challenge to face. And then to start planning for this. In order to plan, the context of speed is requiring much more agile actions, and to be more efficient if we're thinking about the insurance industry, and more enabling technologies, thinking of how quickly and how greatly the financial sector is changing and the way you should react. We should be very aware that it's not only a reality, in our present, but that it's here to stay. It's not a trend. So when we listen to all these messages and signals coming to us from different directions, well, if this is the reality, what should I do first? And what will happen first? We heard about some experience from developed countries, but it's very important to always keep the context. Where Colombia is a country that's making greater efforts to develop and try to think of it, the development of the whole society, where the insurance sector is crucial in many aspects of this new reality into the future of Colombians. The great question that we as authorities pose ourselves continuously is, what do we want to convey? And we want to convey to the insurance industry is what will happen first. Should I wait for the big firms to come to Colombia and request any type of statement from the regulating agencies, or should I wait for the insurance industry to move itself proactively and evolve to a certain stage before we intervene more? Should I expect a new type of consumer, or better definition of the final consumer of so many new products? Is that what should happen? Well, the big conclusion is it doesn't matter if you do one thing or the other first. The important thing first is that this offer can consolidate at least 6 elements, and the insurance industry needs to differentiate itself. This is the first one. Differentiate itself from what? Well, from all this understanding of not only accompanying people in the traditional elements that they did. I'm sure you've discussed this, but there's many other ways now to accompany that life cycle of a person, if you will, and their transformation. And it should not be a stranger and not present yourself in a contradictory position on the other side either. We should always think about cooperation and shared strategies so that a big tech and an insurance company can contribute and collaborate together in a country such as ours, in a context such as ours. And here a superintendent, as me, also needs to understand this evolution. Second is the amount of data. So much data, big data, and how to more efficiently use this. What is the assurance that I'm giving the owner of this information to provide peace of mind so that we're combining adequately the resilience and the ability to answer to an event that can take place in his life and that he wants to ensure, but also that this information is properly custodied and generating confidence for the users of these applications where they provide information. And the superintendent's office also needs to react to this. Third is interaction with customers. So much talk about this, but what have we really done? Terms and conditions, small print, finer print, larger print. What are the elements that are being included now so that we don't want to describe a world that's very futuristic, that's a robot or a digital element that is the only way of contact that I have, nor can we think about personal interaction on the other opposite extreme as the solution always either. So then thinking of products and distribution channels and the new risk approaches requires a proactive approach. I think big tech companies know a lot about technology. They know a lot about the tech sector, and that generates some risks, but the insurance industry can also contribute greatly to understand how this future could look like of an insurance industry within an environment where the technology and the big tech companies are having a greater and greater role. Then interconnection or connectivity between devices, between users, technological connectivity in its greater understanding of this term, or in the broader understanding of this term. I mean, if I'm moving myself through a web page with a technological alliance, what other elements can I incorporate so that I can say that I have a product that can reach and effectively solve multiple issues to a population in an interconnected manner, and thanks to this interconnection. And then the big data and the technology to use it will accelerate many processes for monitoring, which is the next element. But what happens with this monitoring? What are we doing with this supervision or monitoring that all these tools are providing for us? It's a speed of reaction is the answer. where the consumer at the center of this speed of reaction and the consumer at the center of our discussions. And I think we need to see and understand this, and the way I'm describing it, just as big tech companies understand it, and how this approach is now being used in our industry as well. So how does a superintendent, in our role as a supervising entity, how do we see the big tech companies coming into the insurance sector? Where I think innovation and coming into consolidating a system more and more with the best of both worlds requires adaptability, not just to the specific tech instrument, but also in the conviction where you have the certainty that we can have an environment where there will be clear rules of the game, of course, for everybody, and where it's a level playing field to develop our different activities in this industry. That's where we're trying to define and talk about with the insurance sector. So we believe that big tech and its coming into the sector is a huge opportunity. Of course, it generates challenges, but those challenges cannot block and freeze our minds with fear. We need to channel this fear and focus it on extracting the most positive of these challenges to make them opportunities. Where I believe that this industry, just like many others, requires this right now and can be very beneficial to this industry from these big tech players coming in. I think we don't need to go, very deeply into what the typical DNA of a big tech company looks like, and the approach that I have from data management, the approach that we have from the industry sector, and then the scientific or the science behind this, just to understand that this new context brings there are so many new types of scientists now that need to feedback from each other as they are more specialized, and going into separate paths is not the most convenient thing right now with all these degree of interaction that we require between the different sciences. And then the discussion that with all the different channels and the intermediation and to what extent will it take place or not depends to a great deal on the customer. It's in the customer's hand. Do you want to interact mostly with a person over the phone, and that's what they want to do, or will they interact by activating with your phone a product or a service that satisfies a specific need that you're wanting to satisfy? The size of the network, clearly the scope and what a big tech can encompass or can attack as network sizes is absolutely important. And then data, trying to understand what is the advancement that we want to achieve using this data is crucial, because the data in the end, after all the discussion, cannot just be a competitiveness element. We need to think more in how this data becomes the means to have capacity to react, capacity to anticipate, capacity to then accompany in every moment of the life cycle of a person and be there for him as an insurer. And as a big tech, I see this part very similar because when part of the great success of a big tech is generate an environment where a person can move around all day long within his daily activities. You should just be like one additional window, if you will, one additional option, of course conveying the necessary risk, of managing and administering this that will need to be allocated. So this is the type of ecosystems that we are imagining, both for the financial and banking system that has already had huge advancements in this, and now the insurance sector needs to generate ecosystems. This is not a discussion about what is the final purpose or what are the means, because regardless, people should feel the same capacity for understanding, the same capacity of mobility, of trying to buy a good or a service, whether it's with money or cash or digitally, or the opportunity of understanding that there will be a risk that he will face later on in his life. And if he can deal with this on a day-to-day basis, understanding there's accompaniment for him or her, if it's for my physical development, for my social evolution, and accompaniment for so many aspects of your life. If it's a food program, to take better care of their health, all this data interacting, generate different businesses, and it becomes a whole new animal, if you will, understanding that these challenges present in this environment is not only about generating one element of profitability, but a much broader understanding with several elements of profitability. This is a reality now, and it's not easy for a supervisor to think this way. Our traditional supervisor, it can be quite a challenge, but I insist this is the way in which we can develop the best way to bring our country forward. And there's specific questions about some types of products and some types of services, but we need to think about the problem we want to solve. We need to put this at the center of the discussion, so that's no longer the issue. We need to think about a much more relevant penetration indicator. So many challenges our country could convey, could transfer in a more sustainable and better way is the way to go. So thinking this way, we also need to recognize that big tech companies have big advantages, present big opportunities, but they're not managers of technical resources. And we need to put this argument on the table. They can come in and very good to learn quickly and can generate an environment so quickly. But really for an administrator, a supervisor, at least in this first stage of this ecosystem, thinking of the stability and of the activity that's always in the interest of the public involves having a financial capacity, as is natural, to assume all the responsibilities that come with this. An integral risk assessment and financial risk, of course, and technical risk, of course, and then non-financial risk. And the experience that in the sector, do you have in your sector, make you understand better the impact that not necessarily go through a quantitative estimator only. And putting ourselves in the shoes of our customers, understanding the management of certain assets that could have greater risk, and then advancing in different time frames. Perhaps I need a contract that's 1 year long. Perhaps I need contracts with shorter terms. Perhaps I don't need to have a long interview form for all my customers, but sometimes these are legal requirements. So we need to learn to manage these risks based on the accompaniment that we are defining, and understanding that the insurance industry not only has a role in terms of risk management and providing policies and coverages, but a role as an institution or institutionality that is critical to develop many other businesses, including the capital market. So in the end, a big tech, and from the point of view of us as supervisor, they're very good in technology, they're very good in generating networks, they're very good in using simple and easy language, and getting to know their users very well, very quickly. We are also aware that there are big hurdles in their initial insertion into the industry to come in. And for the superintendents, it's also in a world where we can also think about third-party contracting some processes and outsourcing these, and because someone could understand that you're subcontracting the licenses, you're subcontracting a license that was initially awarded to one person, and then it's really another person that's behind it, providing and doing everything. We need to define these things clearly and define our environment so that the big techs can have successful collaborations like we see in other industries, like the bank and e-payment. We've seen huge collaborations and mergers as examples of how all the strategic alliances can take place. And I insist, strategic alliances, not alliances to provide a specific service, not to share only a minimum of information, but both the insurance industry and the big tech putting the best that they can bring in to have prevent frauds, having the best prices, and have true collaboration, never forgetting that the users about this, even in our environment, should always make us think about the challenge of providing this environment. It's not a physical office, it's not a chat application, it's about being in the shoes of that final user, even before he feels a necessity for a certain product or service. Now, this is another way to go, and the big tech is welcome In the last 7 or 8 months, we've seen a great demand or a great appetite to come into the Colombian market from big tech, a market that generates certainty about being able to leverage itself with technology because there's clear rules of the game, there's solid institutionality. So I think the message that we need to provide now is that for the same level of risk, we should have the same level of standards. And we need to flexibilize some of those standards, actually, because the risk is that we don't strengthen this enough before we have the incursion of big tech in our industry. I think this is the most important thing during this accompaniment to our users, and financial inclusion is a topic that I also wanted to mention. We need to foster improvement and betterment of society and having better services and goods to a society that is craving this right now. Lower costs, lower intermediation fees, purging of the specific needs and clarifying these, which should all help us to have a greater amount of people or users in this inclusion factor. And this is a topic that is not only thinking about this as a business, but because of the several necessities where we need to educate people as well. Big tech will really help us in achieving greater understanding and break paradigms so that culturally we can also have a cultural mindset shift to coming closer to technology and obtain the great benefits that it brings with it. And this inclusion needs to be present in this strategy. And when we look outwards, what big tech is doing in other places, and a great discussion about what's going to happen with big tech around the world, I think we already have great examples in the financial services industry. Is such a huge offer that is possible thanks to big tech. And thinking of insurance companies, that is also similar in to a great extent. There are things that we should already be collaborating on to improve in our country. We need to increase the public interest so that everybody can, in the most efficient way, develop their daily activities. We are all facing risks of different natures all the time, and it is important to have what's the exposure to all this risk all the day, and not identifying and actually being able to transfer these to another party. It is very important right now in a country like ours, where we have perhaps greater exposure to climate changes, certain catastrophic events, personal identity theft, and so many things that are important. If we could have a market to develop this in the best way, understanding that there's always someone to accompany you facing these risks. And talking about risks, well, great that there's risks, and for the superintendents, there is the clarity that big tech as strategic players need to accept some of the risks as agents that will also, be in the formalities that developing this new types of relationship, and the risks that we as authorities are seeing with developments like this. They will know of some risks better. The insurance sector will know and understand some of these risks better, but we need to identify them clearly, and we need to define how to manage each of these. And if I'm always swimming in this world where I'm a collaborator or partner or affiliated to under a party working in this industry, there's different things to consider. Where some specific services, if there's data storage services or interconnection services, so many options now, from the operational standpoint, I think presents us with a very clear channel to start collaborating on. That always looking out at and watching out so that it does not bring down the industry, and we want to keep proper balance in our industry so that there's positive growth and evolution. And we don't want this concentration to take place too much and become a limiting factor for people trying to come into this industry. But I think it also provides certainty so that big tech or any companies coming in understand until what extent they can work and engage in activities in this industry, and also understanding that for a certain type of entity or company, there are certain regulations that will help them understand their level of exposure and involvement. And talking about big tech, as we say, if you're not risking something yourself, the way that you're going to handle your governance and decision making could be altered and biased, where perhaps we won't get the best equilibrium and having the best risk selection and the best incentives to reach the greatest amount of players and have the most positive environment. Now, with these companies being, independent entities, besides, trying to contaminate everybody with positivity in this environment, there's also your reputation put at stake, and taking care of your brand name, of your social accountability, and your goodwill that could be on the line from in the case of all these companies, needs to be understood in an environment that requires clarity. It's not just about asset laundering and preventing that. It's not just about not affecting the user negatively. There are many other elements that we need to define better to understand in a broader way how with big tech coming in will become more relevant, just as have been in the financial sector. And then systemic risks and a clear roadmap to understand if today an entity like this that's having issues, how can we, really having issues in the industry, how can we have them move out of the sector in an orderly fashion without generating chaos? So that's my point of view from a superintendent, and I don't want to present too complex of an environment. I think this is a great opportunity to have very positive things, but we don't want this party to go out of control, if you will. These are all the elements that we are continuously interested in looking after. So from this perspective, the big tech companies are perhaps not used to developing their activities in a framework such as the insurance one. It's not about disencourage them from coming into this industry. It's just about understanding and developing the best environment, defining things clearly so that we can have solutions to any issue that might come about. And many of these issues transcend the responsibility or scope of our financial superintendents. There's so many risks and challenges that cannot be under a single supervising body. There are many entities that should be intervening and participating now. And I think it's already happening today. Talking about cybersecurity that was mentioned, security and safety of information for individuals, restrictive elements to define what is the regulatory perimeter, what is of public interest and what is not. Where a good exercise from the banking sector and the e-payment sector has already been developed. And we just did it with the insurance sector. That is very important to give the initial thrust to this new reality and environment. And going into the final part of our presentation, big tech companies, from the supervisory standpoint, will require to understand very well the business, risk and business profile, transmission channels, and understanding truly what activities consist and are a financial activity and what is not. Because today this is an entirely new world. What we previously thought was of public interest maybe is no longer that. And thinking of operational risk, we had certain parameters that perhaps are no longer valid. The cloud service is already available to any company to store information, to expand capacities, to have physical or not have physical infrastructure of their own. So many uses that you can give now to cloud services that at supervisory body, we need to adapt ourselves and understand these to be able to supervise them. Human resources and human talent, a big discussion there where it's important to understand that big tech and insurance industry needs to be able to have a technical discussion framed in the new reality about human resources. And I don't know if we're prepared, because when we read different conclusions from when these discussions are taking place, I see that it's sometimes not giving capabilities to everybody and all the stakeholders to identify risks, potential elements to develop. And we don't want this to become a hurdle in the incubation of new companies coming in. And as authorities, we always want to look after, beyond the discussion of fintech or insurtech or autonomous companies, and which is more important, that it's a level playing field for everybody. And if this involves flexibilizing some standards or adapting and changing some standards, that's what we will have to do. And if we want to go beyond and elevate that standard, I think this is the way where we can generate greater confidence and trust in a sector that can truly promote this innovation and transformation that is so much required right now. And I repeat, interinstitutional cooperation. It's no longer a discussion about a financial supervisor. Like, we need to exchange information, cooperate between orgs, at least initially, to understand all this environment where the borders are just changing, are blurry now. And it's important with risk management to understand what is the best for our country. And this requires a superintendent to develop tools that are always enabling and not limiting. And we've done so, I think. Now, the good news to close this presentation is that there's a very clear guideline, an institutional guideline to support the inclusion of more and more technology into the financial sector, having greater innovation and transformation, to have greater financial inclusion, better products, better services, and an ecosystem that is capable of satisfying the necessities of all Colombians in any corner of a country. There's only 5 or 6 working lines right now that are already very consolidated. It's not just a simple PowerPoint where we have a fintech licensing, we have a great deal of licenses now authorized. Totally different approach. Just to give you an example, we went for the private individual as final beneficiary, being benefited as a stakeholder. Now, where capital fund investment, they can own a greater share, and working directly. So this is about changing the way of participating, saying, I will raise this capital myself if you want to. And fintech is picking up on all these different schemes and way of working. Third-party agents or the subcontracting models, the ways of sharing information, because the third-party contracting was not so easy before, and we need to assume there's some opportunity now. Cybersecurity, other technologies that help us dehumanize, in the good sense of the word, so that technology can do what it does best and humans can do the task or the activities that they are best in. So that technology provides inputs to let humans do what they do best in the most positive way. And in an environment such as this, we were always regulating, thinking of suspicion. And now with this 4.0 mindset, we want to change this approach and mindset so that the follow-up and supervision, and for when a company wants to leave or in payments, everything can be managed not just with better technological tools, but with greater autonomous activity, and that let's just customize the knowledge that we are obtaining continuously. And there are already technological standards in the industry that are no longer good practices, but from the supervision and regulatory standpoint have been specifically defined, and we want to be world-class. Colombia is an important actor in the region. I think we've had a leadership in this transformation in multiple sectors. It has been recognized as so in different venues, but we're also part of an environment that's trying to mix, to exchange ideas, to have a more productive environment within the inter-American environment of ABS, because this is the larger environment of the insurance sector. I don't know if it's the same orgs that we're always going to be working with in the future, but we need to supervise and look after an insurance sector or industry. And as far as you have the possibility to adapt, have a serious, well-regulated environment, thinking of all the risks, this will be positive. And my final reflection is that the sandbox is fundamental. Innovation is a must right now in the financial sector and from us as supervising agencies. realize how in the insurance sector, the number of agents coming in and asking and requesting innovation requests isn't 5% right now. I think it's a good time right now to provide a first initial thrust for this industry to consolidate all the technological advancements that have been included so far. And that's why it's so important for us. Non-physical sales, non-face-to-face sales that increased so much during the pandemic has been great. I mean, the industry needs to be proud of all this digital component being so important and so significant now in non-presential, non-face-to-face sales, but we need to think in a strategy and not in a specific product to work with from here on. So I think we have our big sandbox right now, big invite to big tech and entrepreneurs that feel that investment in the insurance sector has all these options to develop regulated, not so regulated spaces, even spaces to provide temporary licenses to develop a specific activity. All of these spaces controlled from the authority standpoint that are always to be properly regulated. This is my invitation to all of you, and I cannot miss this opportunity to say that our law in all this already developed financial and e-payment systems will really help us to solidify and think about a future where technology and digital transformation is a part of the insurance sector from now on. So there's tools from all types of sectors. The state has done its part and given you a framework of rules of the game. I think we've broken the rules to what a traditional supervising or superintendent agency is traditionally doing. So we're not so orthodox and close-minded. We are thinking of what's the best for the country and trying always to think of the well-being of society that will be generated when we are open-minded to understand and accept and include the fact that as a supervising agency we need to change in this future. We are putting all these innovation standards, always comparing with the best standards and world-class standards. It's been 3 years using our sandbox, fostering many of the developments we already see implemented today. Has been great. And what's missing? Well, to advance in this final decision that as an industry we can move forward and have big techs coexisting, whether autonomously or not, or through strategic partnerships within an insurance sector that truthfully today more than ever needs to make the use of this, the context of this moment, and needs to transcend for the well-being of whole of a society that requires this transformation in your industry right now. That's our position as financial superintendents. Thank you so much for the invite and for your attention to here today. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Very thorough presentation, and I believe you touched on basically all the points that we have been discussing and that are fundamental in this interesting dynamic of tech development and new environments in our sector. And there's two important points to talk about between technology and insurance, and it's their transversal nature. Industries that permeate so many other sectors of the economy. And I would like to have 2 or 3 questions for you about some of your comments. First question is, thinking of all these new entrepreneurial technological developments, and these companies know so much about tech, but perhaps not so much about risk and risk analysis. And the insurance business is specialized in risk management. How do you see executing supervision from your standpoint that is fair for everybody in an industry that has very consolidated regulations and rules of the game, with this new tech companies coming in with a regulation that, like you say, is under construction? There's still, isn't that not unlevel playing field? Yeah, sure. Well, I say this is the starting point, and we need to see it. It's not the arriving point. It's a challenge. We need to think between all of us, what is the final point that we want to converge in. Tech companies are expert in some things, and the traditional regulation and risk management has made the insurance companies expert in other capabilities. But we need to have and think about well-being for a society, for a country, and for an economy that requires support and nourishment right now from all sectors. Today we have all the tools that a designer of public policy would like to define, describe, implement, and sustain a level playing field for all the involved players in our industry. And I think from the insurance industry, what it corresponds to, is understand that we are open to do anything to have a level playing field and understand the challenges that both sectors have, because we need to understand there's a differentiated, playing fields for each sector, but that's not the point. That's the starting point. We want to collaborate and bring our capacities together between Insurtech and big tech and companies where some companies have had clear actions already, and I think first steps that are interesting. But now is the moment to ponder and reflect as an industry how much innovation should we incorporate and bring in right now, and what's the final point we want to reach. And this is only developed if we're working on this on a day-to-day basis. There's tools that are already have been implemented. I don't know when the specific arbitration has been in each case, but wherever we need to adapt and flexibilize, we will do it. Whenever we need to be more strict and demandful, we will demand some more, understanding the restrictions of everybody as stakeholder in this industry, always trying to define if this is of public interest or not. And what I mentioned in my discussion, you think insurance intermediation, brokerage is something that is relevant in this big tech sector always. Sometimes it will be. In other sophisticated sectors, it's a must. But maybe if someone wants to call their broker and say, this is what I want, and just deal with them, all these options need to be available. And I think you are clear with your question in identifying an issue. But I think this is just a starting point, and all companies are facing the same. The challenge is, how are we going to converge into the future that we want to get to? It's not about saying that technology makes me sacrifice entirely things that I want to do, or on the contrary, the traditional insurance industry will prevent technological development. We want to have better qualities of services and goods offered to our society. That's it. Okay, Dr. Salazar. Also, technology, and maybe colloquially speaking, is just running us over. The speed of change is just so great that innovations are just so many and so often that sometimes transform entirely the way of operating, that one can feel apprehensive and fearful. In Colombia is the same, saying that legislation is always behind innovation and is always trying to follow and keep up to innovation that has a greater capacity than legislative bodies and governments to adapt and evolve and regulate, thinking of all these new changes. How do you see this race? Do you see it's an uneven race, or do you think it's possible to try and have a legislation that is keeping up to the pace of these huge innovations that we're seeing? Miguel, I will answer you with an anecdote. And I'm a runner myself. I like to run because it's a very important moment of reflection, and it's a personal challenge for me. I try to always keep track of time. I run the half marathon of Bogota, and I was very proud of myself. But then the next week, I was looking at the times of people that participate in the Olympics, and I was just so sad for myself, and thinking to myself, what am I doing? I shouldn't be running anymore. This makes no sense comparing to the times of the Olympians. And why do I say this? I'm not an Olympian. I'm not competing with the people we saw on TV on the Olympics, but I believe I enjoyed just as much as a professional or high-performance athlete does in one of these big leagues. And I think this race is not about betting to be the winner of the race only. It's natural that with this evolution, we can recognize always a social reality behind it, but I think we need to recognize the social reality first and have clear anchor points and a guiding north, and not understand only things as I was when looking at comparing my times in the Bogota marathon compared to the Olympic times, because there is no time that I can achieve this performance that those high performance athletes have. Not in running. So what do we need? We need instruments where we can leverage proper regulation, adequate supervision, and Colombia has those, and I think that's why we've been able to consolidate so many transformations that we've seen already. What does Colombia have? Institutionality, very powerful entities, powerful in terms of the faculties that we have to intervene, and technical capacity that in other times it was very hard to talk about supervision based on risk management. Today, it's our daily bread. Today, it's about compliance. Today I don't need to have a specific law for the industry to develop itself. That cannot be the conceptual construct that we're always waiting for. And it cannot be like me comparing myself with the Olympians. I think thinking about innovation, everybody has a natural apprehension to change. And change is scary, but you can decide if you make a change an opportunity or make it a failure beforehand. And I think you've seen the way regulation has been transforming itself, the industry itself, the availability of more and more technologies that make the inertia now not a long race or 42K race, but a continuous relay race. I move myself, you move behind me, I move myself next to you, you move in response. Other people are moving around us. So this is how the superintendent understands the impact of regulation, where all the spaces are given so that we can deal with these challenges and face them in the best way. So I would answer Dr. Miguel that perhaps it's not a race that we want to win, but the one that needs to win in the end is the consumer. A final consumer sitting before an app, having the opportunity to buy life insurance for an international flight or whatever kind of coverage. He's the one that's going to win. He's the one that independently is providing certain services or engaging in certain activities will be, and we need to be the final winner. That's our task. I think we can advance, and public-private alliances for innovation and to leverage innovative entrepreneurships, I think is critical. I think we need to have this in a private's involvement to grow this sector. And you see how the payment system is working. The number of digital transactions is growing exponentially, and great achievements so far. And that's why we have an inclusion, financial inclusion factor that makes us hopeful that we are working in the right direction. Okay, Dr. Castaño, do you think that technology, it's reducing many of our risks, but it also generates no risks? It can be a two-way highway. Do you think that even in the case of developed countries that have had greater technological developments and are facing this impotence, perhaps of achieving the right controls, the adequate security levels, do you think this dimension of security, understanding it as the reduction of risk in the utilization of technology, have we incorporated that culturally well enough? Don't you think that with technology we're a little, colloquial, sharing passwords and everything? Do you think that's a huge vulnerability that we can be facing as a society in this evolution? Yes, it is. It is. Miguel, I think the easiness that technology creates sometimes, being at the fingertips of anybody with much easier access, also generates that relaxation unconsciously in your mind. And I think it's difficult to achieve understanding that security, physical security or cybernetic security, needs to start with clear rules for cooperation, distribution, and segregation of responsibility and accountability, And when acquiring a specific tech or good, we understand one part of it, but we don't understand our duties. We understand our rights, but not our duties. And I hope you understand this in the positive way. We need to emphasize on our duties. We should focus, and it's the natural burden of being a Colombian citizen or a citizen of whatever jurisdiction. And it's exactly the same with security. I cannot intend to build security if I'm walking around with my debit card with a post-it on top with a password, not to forget it. Or if I'm sharing sensitive passwords. Or if I'm lingering in certain public places, not taking care of my security. So it's a task of each and every one of us. We are exposing ourselves, and delinquents and criminals have their companies also. And there are companies trying to think all the time about how they can better monetize those vulnerabilities that we are presenting them with. So we do have to have the best quality standards, yes, but we need to have a quality culture. I can be in a very safe neighborhood, but I need to still close my door at night, otherwise a cat, an animal, whatever might come in. So we are always exposed to new risks, but we do need to change our security culture a bit. We need to understand how to manage these risks, that the main accountable party for my security is me. And today, if I have an app with facial recognition, and that's great, and I can work with to send it to my friends simulated songs, whatever, but we don't understand that it is very delicate information that we're dealing with. I think this culture needs to be improved, and that's from the ordinary citizen to the big corporations, where we have these cybernetic events taking place and breaches taking place worldwide. And when you go and analyze the cause, sometimes it appears so simple, like so stupid or so easy to detect, and we say, how is it possible that this happened? And we can be expert in security, but I don't know how expert are we in understanding how every individual is moving within the system. We need to adapt. The superintendent has tried to do so. The industry has done an important effort, not just through investment, but trying to come closer to, in this ecosystem, share and distribute the burden, because it's not about the state being the only responsible, not the platform itself being the only ones accountable for it, but continuous coordination to ensure that there's a better management overall. We can never say that we are completely, bulletproof in case of securities, technology advances, so do the possible breaches. But what's also important is to have reaction capability when facing any situation like this. Thank you, Dr. Castaño. You've used the word ecosystem many times now, and I'm convinced that inadequate regulation and supervision or oversight can hinder the development of ecosystems. But the question is, do you think that adequate regulation and oversight really fosters the development of this ecosystem, or should this responsibility be left and on the shoulders of the industries that are interested in this business and participating in this sector? I think, Miguel, it's about timing and understanding moments. Of course, the public sector and the authorities will never achieve the capabilities that the private sector can develop sometimes. The private sector potentiates everything that the state can have, in its sandbox or ideas, but does not have the capacity to develop for several reasons. And the private sector needs to lead and potentiate this type of development. But I believe our country is in a moment right now where the foundations need to be as solid as possible, and as authorities, we need to have a key role in this stage and be leaders. I'll also tell you another anecdote. When we launched our sandbox in 2017, before all of this strange things happened, my colleagues had the opportunity of participating on several events. I think we're very active in supervision bodies and international oversight committees and bodies, trying to think of how to open the space for innovation. And when we made this comment, everybody looked at this like, who is this guy? Why is the superintendent of finance mentioning this? But we did this because we saw that in other non-financial industries, it was already taking place. And it's your job as oversight body to anticipate that this will also come into your industry. And then other people talk about if it's legal or not legal, if I can download this app or if I shouldn't download this app. But we in the financial sector, as public policy made a very clear decision. We're going to promote digital transformation, period. Not digital transformation just to say we're doing digital transformation, but because this is the future to provide for a better country. So speaking of times and understanding moments at a given point, then the public oversight bodies will need to let go of this leadership and role. But if there's not this initial moment of clear guidelines on how to order the industry, having clear rules of the game, and the limitations and flexibility, it's going to be very difficult. This is how to handle in the United Kingdom and Singapore and other places where the ones that are in this leadership roles in the kickoff stage has been critical. And in other places, I mean, the superintendent's office could just, cover their eyes and hope for the best. And this is not the best situation. You can choose to make your reality, and be involved in the development of your reality, or just close your eyes and put your head in the ground. That's what we want from the financial superintendents in all its lines, is as efficient as possible. And it's unthinkable today if we don't talk about technology and digital transformation and a key role of the governing or regulating bodies. Thank you, Superintendent. As always, you are very generous with your time and the comments with us and towards the insurance sector. Thank you so much for participating in Insurtech 2021. And I believe that this challenge you set out and describe with great clarity is the biggest challenge of any financial sector right now, specifically the insurance sector for us. Thank you so much.